by saying, drawing your attention to this. I think it's also for those listening that these proceedings are covered by parliamentary privilege, and essentially you're afforded and we are afforded the same privilege that we would have as during a state's sitting, and effectively, as long as what we're saying, what you're saying today is something that you know to be untrue, then we of course we wouldn't expect that, but otherwise you're covered for what you give to us today in the same way as we would be, as I said, in a state sitting. If I can just add, although I was away on state business for Wednesday, I did manage to tune in for the statement and subsequent questions. It's quite clear that there were outstanding questions that other members wished to ask after the full 30 minutes. And I think this session here is partly to answer to that, that desire for continued questioning of some of the points that you did make in your statement, Minister. Could I ask, just for the record, that we introduce ourselves? So I'm Deputy Montfort. I'm the Chair of the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel.
I am Deputy Max Andrews.
Jeff Sullivan, member of the panel.
Minister?
Deputy as well. Deputy Kirsten Morel, Minister for Sustainable Economic Development.
Deputy Steve Luce, Deputy for St Martin and Grooville.
Andy Skate, I'm the Chief Officer for Infrastructure and Environment.
Matt Thomas, I'm the CEO of Ports Jersey.
Before we start with the questions, although this is a question in a sense about what your capacities are here, I must admit I wasn't expecting, or we weren't expecting Deputy Luce to be present. Could you just explain why you brought him along and what his capacity is here today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think there's...
Well, I'm happy to explain.
Yeah, do you want to go for it?
Yeah, obviously I've got quite a lot of experience in ferry work. I worked heavily on contingency for Brexit along with the Economic Department 4, 5, 6 years ago. And when I heard about some of the challenges over 12 months ago now faced by our ferry company, I offered my services to the then Minister as a backbencher to help if I could in any way, and the offer was taken up, and I've worked alongside Deputy Morel ever since.
So that was in relation to contingency.
Yeah.
And then moving forward, as obviously Deputy Luce became Minister for Environment and became part of the Council of Ministers, he's been cited on the whole process from a ministerial perspective with me, alongside some other ministers as well.
Can I just clarify? So you said Deputy Luce started working with you as effectively as an advisor, but before he was a minister?
Well, as advisor, and also Deputy Luce was a member of Scrutiny at the time, and as we were going into that time back in December last year where we were seeking contingency, I did think it would be worthwhile having eyes on me as well, because I come at this always from the perspective of I am just trying to do what is right for Jersey. I don't have a particular political angle on this whole scenario at all. And so I wanted to know that when, in this case, around contingency, were we doing the right things? And having another set of eyes, particularly in this case also experienced eyes, because of the background that Deputy Luce just talked about, it seemed like a really good idea to invite Deputy Luce along.
It just adds another element of surprise to us in the sense that we're finding out there's still a lot of questions about the process, and that we didn't know that Deputy Luce was involved in the process.
That was part of the contingency.
So whilst you're welcome to bring anyone you like, we're going to ask obviously direct questions to you. You're our minister in the sense that we scrutinise you. We don't scrutinise the Environment Department.
That's correct.
But could you also just explain the capacity in which the other two officers, or your other two officers, if I can call them that, are accompanying you today?
So obviously Andy Skate is the Senior Reporting Officer for the ferry tender process, having taken over from Richard Corrigan a month or so ago.
24th of October.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. And
Shall I?
Heart, is it?
Sorry, I guess from a port's perspective there's a natural overlap, but we've been engaged to provide technical advice to government throughout the procurement process.
Okay, thank you.
So if I could just quickly go back, I think one of the points, I guess, by bringing Deputy Luce here is to show that none of this, since December last year through till today, have I been doing on my own.
Yeah.
I have been working with other ministers, and obviously Scrutiny, I brief Scrutiny whenever asked to. I have always done this in conjunction with others to check my thinking all the way through.
Can I just say, one thing that struck me is that your absence of assistant ministers in this whole process. So you do have two assistant ministers, one of whom has a good background in logistics, and the other of whom is a corporate lawyer, and it seems that you could have probably done with advice on both of those areas from your assistant ministers rather than bringing in a minister who's not directly related to your department.
Might I just answer that, Chair, because I did say in the introductions I was here as Deputy for St Martin and Grewell and not as Minister for the Environment. I joined this project as a backbencher. I'd like to feel I would still be part of it as a backbencher if I hadn't become a minister.
Okay, look, I think we're going to... It does blur the lines between the Troy rule, the executive and government. We're here to scrutinise government. We're not here to scrutinise the deputy of St Martin's and Grewell. So insofar as I've said before, I don't mean any disrespect to Deputy Luce, but we will be directing questions to you, Minister.
I didn't expect anything else, but just quickly on the Deputy Jehan and Deputy Scott. So Deputy Jehan has... Constable, sorry, thank you. I don't know where I got deputy from. Constable of St John has been cited in many parts of this, and not all, but many. He has been there, and like I say, other ministers have also been very cited on this as well. This, if you wanted, I could actually bring 4 or 5 ministers in who have been there for most of this process.
Okay.
But you know, I didn't bring 4 or 5.
Let's turn to questions, because I don't want to get bogged down in that you bring who you like, Minister, but ultimately we'll be asking you the questions and bring in others as you need to. Well, the first thing I want to ask, it arises out of a question you were asked by Deputy Wall on Wednesday, where he asked, and I'm not going to focus on the question, but rather the answer for the time being. He asked, how was it that Condor were allowed to submit a bid in the first place if you knew they were in financial difficulty? And your answer was, I can't go into any detail about any decisions made with the procurement process. I wasn't there for all those decisions, but Condor were able to enter into the bidding process, and I have to take assurances from the assessors that that was a reasonable thing to do. There are a couple of questions that I think arise from that statement you made. The first is that you said you weren't there for all of those decisions that were made in the procurement process. Can I clarify, do you mean that you weren't there for any of those decisions, or that you weren't there for some of those decisions?
No, what I was trying to say there is that the process, quite appropriately, and I believe this is also the case in Guernsey, the actual process itself was a procurement process, and as a minister, I wasn't in that procurement process. That was a process that was run by the procurement team in conjunction with the then SRO and other officers, and that was to ensure that I then come in afterwards, you know, with a recommendation, etc., being able to see that with fresh eyes. So I didn't take part in that process.
But the criteria of the procurement process, were you involved in putting those criteria together?
I was involved in looking at some of the minimum service requirements. I remember adding to one of the minimum service requirements at the time. Outside of that, I obviously was sent the invitation to tender beforehand, read through it, but it was the procurement team that designed the procurement process. And please do correct me if I'm wrong. Again, this is why I have asked officers to be here as well, because on that side I'm not as cited as others.
And when you talk about the SRO,
Sorry, I think
can I just finish that? So in terms of the SRO, tell us what that means. What is an SRO? Who was
Senior
that?
Reporting Officer.
And who was that?
So that during this, up till the 24th of October, it was Richard Corrigan.
So we had actually asked for Richard Corrigan he was invited as well. He's not here today. Is there a reason for that?
So Richard Corrigan is on sick leave and has been. I don't really want to go any further into that because that's entirely personal. But
we wouldn't want somebody who
could have been here, could not been here. I am concerned about some of the media coverage, and as someone who is on leave for those reasons, I am concerned that excessive media coverage may be difficult.
We wouldn't want somebody who's on sick leave to attend, but it's we wish him a speedy recovery. But we are mindful, of course, that up until this point he had been involved in the process.
That's correct.
So
yeah.
you did say that you had to take assurances from the assessors about, in this case, Condor's inclusion in the first place in the bid. Did you take those assurances from the assessors? And who were the assessors?
So again, I'm not keen on naming people. There was a team on our side. There were 4 evaluators.
But officers?
A mixture of officers of government, a legal officer from the law officers, Matt.
Okay.
Yeah, if it helps, it's normal in a procurement process. Firstly, the SRO role is the senior government officer responsible to oversee the process, to make sure that the process is being undertaken in the right way, and ultimately to make recommendations to the minister as a result of the process. So normally under the public finance manual, we have accountable officer roles, AO roles and an SRO role. The SRO effectively is in charge of executing the process. The AO is effectively signs the checks but they have budget responsibility for the process in the department. So that's what the SRO role is. So that's my role since the 24th of October. Just as part of the procurement process, it's normal just to have generally an officer-based team who are there to do the evaluations. I can talk if you want about other procurements we've done, but generally you get an officer team who mark up assessments and go through that process, then make a recommendation to the minister.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll come back to that. And could I ask, was Mr. Thomas involved in that as well as an assessor?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
I think just very quickly, because I think it's part of the discourse of kind of Jersey politics that ministers oversee everything. There are times when ministers don't, and that's to remove political influence. And so a large tender process like this, one of the reasons it's done by officers in the actual physical process is to remove the political influence from that, and that's appropriate.
I understand that. Do you accept, though, in order to set up the process, the criteria, it's important that you made sure that you were happy with the beginning of the process and that you're happy that you do take responsibility overall for the process?
Absolutely. I don't try to duck that responsibility, but I just want people to understand that I'm not there day in, day out, looking at the bids, checking what's happening, speaking to different parties, etc. That's not the role of the minister. It would be inappropriate to be.
Yeah. I do need to ask this question about the previous SRO because you indicated that, and you gave a statement about why he was removed from the process. So this is before he was on sick leave. He was removed from this process. I think what you described as an error of judgment. Do you have confidence that that was only an error of judgment in that, in fact, he was a capable person throughout the whole process and that, can you explain then why he was removed from the process?
Well, he removed himself from the process. So he wasn't removed, he removed himself.
Did you agree with that? It was the right thing to do?
Yes, absolutely. And I believe that the media coverage around that proves that it was the right thing to do.
Is there not a risk, though, that you've lost somebody who's really capable? And in fact, if he didn't do anything wrong, it was just aesthetic, if you like, that you've actually lost somebody who's been very capable in that process that could be a valuable asset in this next phase of the process?
That's absolutely correct. I mean, I think the term I used on the day was I've just had my team decapitated. And
did you not plead with him not to leave? Did you not say to him, you don't need to leave, I've got confidence in you?
It wasn't a question of pleading. It was a question of making sure that public perception and the public could have faith in the process that was ongoing. And so I believe that given the media coverage at the time and the nature of the mistake, that it was the right thing to do. And I have to say that Andy has been a superb SRO ever since. And in fact, there's one strong advantage that comes out of it, which is that Andy picked up all the documents and everything with fresh eyes, having seen nothing. And he came to the same conclusions.
Okay, can I pass to Deputy Son?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, here we are, present time, with the joint tender process having failed to produce a single candidate for the ferry. My question is a when question. When did you notice, if at all, that this process, the ferry process, bidding process, was going wrong? Or did you not notice?
No, it's a really interesting concept of going wrong. I think. So I have to get my timeline to be precise, but so it was, I believe, the 17th of October, which should be a Thursday, because I remember it was a Thursday. So just double check. That's when Deputy Inder provided notice of Guernsey's selection of Brittany Ferries as their preferred bidder. It was that moment when I realised there could be a problem here, because I wasn't in a position, I didn't even have a paper at the time I had no recommendation from officers at that time, but I did know that Guernsey had gone ahead and made a decision and there had been no joint discussion about it. So it was at that point that it came clear to me that this could be difficult.
And at any stage, did you notice that was a risk?
So
The failure to come to an agreed
Yeah.
approach was a risk.
That's always been there, and so in the invitation to tender documents, it's quite clear that both islands, the documents themselves provide the possibility for both islands to reach a joint decision, for both islands to reach separate decisions, or for either island to abandon the process entirely. The fact that they have clauses in the invitation to in the tender documents along those lines shows you that it's always been, with any joint tender, it's always a possible risk that you won't come to the same conclusions.
And now here we are with not a joint negotiation going on, or tender going on. So where do you see things going next? Given that we arrived at where we are, and we can't help that.
So, well, we're into another process that has begun. We're waiting for the bids to arrive. Andy is much better versed in telling the timelines, etc. But we're into a new process, and the aim is to announce a winner of that process, and that process is around the Jersey only service, and it's to announce hopefully a winner. And if I'm being honest, I believe it will be the first week of December is when I believe. I think to do it before then is going to be really tough. We're going to try to do it before then, but that would mean next week. I think it's much more likely to be the week after.
And what makes you think you can come to a conclusion, having spent 6 months failing to come to a conclusion, and you're giving yourself a few weeks to come to that conclusion?
Well, a lot of the work has already been done on the previous bids, and so effectively what we're asking for is a refreshing of the existing bids focused on the Jersey only service. And so, and both, well, I believe both have agreed to take part, so I believe they can make the time frame.
Can I ask about the reputational damage to the island? So you had two ferry companies which in good faith have entered into a proposition for a joint tender for both islands with bigger market share, bigger communities that they serve. And at the last minute they're being told actually there's a different proposition. But we know that Condor Ferries, Brittany Ferries has already been offered the Guernsey section. So Guernsey said we want you to operate our service. So it seems to me that there are different scenarios here whereby if Condor have the ability, if they're also selected by you, Minister, to operate in both islands, whereas DFDS have only got the opportunity to operate in one island. So already that's not a level playing field, is it, for both companies in terms of their tender process?
And that's been one of my concerns about this new process, but I will ask Andy to speak to that, if that's okay.
So both companies have been asked exactly the same question. We are now specific. We're not able to make a joint decision with Guernsey because of the decision they've made. So we've asked both companies for a Jersey only service. So we are expecting a submission to serve Jersey. So both companies would be able to serve Jersey. We've had a positive response in terms of the process. They both indicated they will participate. And we're expecting an answer back from their initial submission on close of play tomorrow.
But do you accept the fact that it's no longer a level playing field because Condor have already got the Guernsey contract, if you like, so they'll be serving Jersey and Guernsey if they win, whereas DFDS can only ever serve one island. And so
they are being asked the same question, which is to provide a bid for a Jersey only service.
Sure, but one of which has already been given the Guernsey leg, and that could easily be joined up, couldn't it?
Potentially, but even on the Jersey only service, you ultimately would still have some ferries to Guernsey.
So I go back to the question about reputational damage. Do you think that this process, which a 6 month process, which hasn't provided a clear winner for Jersey, do you think there's been any reputational damage for the island because of that?
It's impossible for me to answer that in so many ways. But I will stick to why are we in this situation. We are in this situation because I was not able to agree with Guernsey when they came forward on the 17th of October and told us that we are going with Brittany Ferries. Yeah. I was not able, when I did get my recommendation paper and looked at the bids and looked at what had gone on, I was not able to safely say, yes, that Jersey should follow that role. And, I said in the States that the FDS had been eliminated. It still strikes me as a very strange basis for elimination, but I accepted it.
Who eliminated them?
That was in theory, by both islands. So through that scoring.
But you eliminated the FDS.
I didn't eliminate it.
But you were in charge of the process.
Yeah. The process came up with the FDS being eliminated. I accepted that.
You talk about the process as if it's separate from you, but you created the process.
Because it is separate from me.
Can you explain that to us? So
I did not create the process.
But you've also told us that the FDS beat Condor on the criteria. So in Jersey, as far as Jersey is concerned, the FDS came out above Condor, so they won the Jersey criteria. They won the marking process for Jersey, but they've been eliminated by whom?
On the consensus scoring, both sides marked them down and eliminated them on the legal.
Both you and your Guernsey counterpart.
Guernsey and Jersey.
You and
not me, no.
But
because I was not involved in that.
But the process is not animate, so there needs to be a conscious person behind it, an agency who eliminated the FDS.
I find it fascinating because I agree with you, there should be a conscious person.
So why didn't you just actually say, I don't agree that they have been eliminated. I haven't chosen to eliminate them. I think they won.
It is not.
So whose decision was it?
I don't know if Andy wants to come in here.
Yeah,
you'll have a better way of explaining this.
During the previous process, if I call it process one, Jersey were not content with either bid. There were still areas of clarification we wanted to seek from both companies. That process effectively didn't end up with a decision to appoint either company because we terminated it. But at the time of termination, the DFDS bid had a legal markdown on it because of some legal elements relating to contract, and the Brittany bid had other marks down it from a Jersey perspective around commercials and investment and financials. So the position at the time was that actually Jersey wanted, as a result of the scoring, that we wanted to go into further clarification and talk about that difference with our Guernsey colleagues, but we were unable to do that.
Can I just
may I come in, Chair?
Can I just ask? Can you hold that thought? I just want to ask you this. You can make a note if you want, but I don't want to lose my thought. So, you said in your statement that the DFDS bid failed on a technical legal point, one which I couldn't personally fathom, because the legal element was still to be negotiated. Okay, so in that sense, you could have said, actually, I disagree that we have failed on the legal point because we haven't negotiated it yet. But instead, you went on to say that you accepted the fact that it had failed. And then you talk about the elimination. And so you're in a point where actually you said DFDS were eliminated.
So
can you clarify that?
So I think it's fascinating that you, Chair, have said exactly what I've been trying to do, which is put the human into the process. For the past month, that is exactly what I've been trying to do. Bring human reasoning to bear on a process which came up with some really interesting results. So I will say it, it's simple. In the legal fail, I didn't understand it. I still don't understand it. It seemed to me that the marking around that legal fail was whoever was evaluating that did not think in any commercial way.
Who did evaluate that?
I prefer not to say. Thank you.
But can you tell us, was it one of your officers or was it an external? I think we need to know who was evaluating that technical point. Who created the technical point? Who created that technical criteria in the first place?
Legal evaluators, okay, who are not part of government, but equally are not external. May we turn that off, please?
I'm sure. I don't know why it's just come
Legal evaluators in both Jersey and Guernsey marked the DFDS bid on the contractual side of it, which was just 5% of the overall marking. Okay, they marked that as a mandatory fail. Okay, I found that difficult to understand at the time, and I still do. But because the bid at this stage is to be the process at this stage is still in the hands of the senior reporting officers. It was not in my hands, okay? And Guernsey chose at that point to say, right, DFDS are eliminated. Jersey said, hold on a sec, this is a bit interesting, we'd like to discuss this. We were told, no discussion, this is what's happening. We accepted that. Afterwards, when we still had massive concerns around Brittany Ferry's Condor bid, particularly around the technical, the commercial and the financial aspects. We had real concerns about that. I, as a Jersey minister, could not overlook those concerns. In the marking, they were shown to be in the fail status. Guernsey had very, very different scoring on that. So what should have happened at that point is, first of all, the senior reporting officers, the Guernsey senior reporting officer and the Jersey senior reporting officer should have come together to discuss the scores that had come in. But Guernsey chose to tie up its scores and just say, we're awarding to Brittany Ferries. No meeting took place, as I understand it, between the senior reporting officers to see, look, we've got two very different perspectives of this. Can we come together? That was, in my view, denied by our counterpart, which was Guernsey. And so that conversation did not happen. We then tried at the political level to bring politicians around the table and say, look, Jersey's got some really genuine, very genuine, as I alluded to in my statement, concerns. But we were not given the opportunity. We did talk with Guernsey politicians, but we were told, we are not changing our mind. This is what we're doing. And so we were in a position where, if you're trying to come to a joint perspective, my perspective, and I was in the room with Deputy Luce, and I was in the room with Deputy Gorst and Deputy Linden, Deputy Farnham, I should say, and possibly others, where we were told there is no room for discussion because Guernsey is not open to changing its mind. And we had asked clarification questions, and Guernsey had said, go ahead and ask your clarification questions. We asked the FDS and we asked Brittany Ferry's clarification questions. We had those come back in, and Guernsey said to us, we're not interested in that information. That will not change our minds. And it wasn't even a matter of changing the minds. It was a matter of saying, we need to bring, will you bring this new information into your thinking? And the answer was no.
Yes, no, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for being in attendance, all of you today, because I know it's obviously at short notice. I just want to really understand, and I know so many members of the public would want this question to be answered, and it's in relation to the ferry process. Obviously, it's been undertaken, and many islanders would be questioning, well, why has there been no firm be selected? And I'd just like to have your thoughts on why we are in the position we're in.
Thank you, Deputy Andrews. I thought I had just explained that. Through the process, one party had been eliminated. The party that wasn't eliminated was not. There were still many, many questions from a Jersey perspective that hadn't been answered. One of them was, who is signing the contract? So one thing that came through was that, as I've said, I believe in answers to my questions, was it Friday last? Following an inquiry from the Chief Minister to Condor Ferries, Brittany Ferries, will we be signing a contract with Brittany Ferries? The answer came back, no, you'll be signing with Condor. Well, by the terms of the tender, that means Brittany Ferries should have been eliminated because they were bidding. The contract should have been signed with the bidder, not with another party, quite simply. Whether it's a subsidiary or not is irrelevant.
Can I ask how it took 6 months to find that out? Would that not be one of the first questions you ask, is who's going to be operating this for you? Because we know that they took over a majority share, I think, during the process. Is that correct?
I believe so.
I think it was in August. And at which point, I would have thought somebody politically would be asking, okay, so now this changes it. Presumably they've taken it over. So all those questions which we will touch on about Condor's financial precarity, if we can call it that, precariousness, has that now changed? Who's going to be operating this? Why was that not established back in at that point?
So again, those questions were asked. The person in this room that's best placed to answer those, because they were in 4 days of meetings with Brittany Ferries, Condor, and separately DFDS, is Mr. Thomas at the end, I'm afraid.
Happy to answer the question. The bidding entity was Brittany Ferries. So the financial due diligence, to your earlier question, was undertaken on Brittany Ferries. It was much later in the process that it became clear that there was uncertainty about who the bidding entity was actually going to be. And so that was a point that was discussed at various points throughout the process, but the final clarification in the form of a yes/no answer was requested by the Chief Minister.
A week last Friday.
At which point confirmation was it was no longer Brittany Ferries, it would be Condor that was signing the contract.
And so I think, yes, so there you go, the 1st of November, sorry, so 2 weeks last week. I think certainly when I spoke to officers, including Matt, including the then SRO, what I got was trying to get those answers was very difficult. That was the sense that I got. Trying to get those really clear answers was not easy. And that's one of the, that's one of the things that I think speaks a lot about why it was not possible for us to award directly in the way that Guernsey did to Condor.
Do you have any further questions?
Yes, I read the speech that you made in the States Assembly, Minister, and I noted that there was mention of an overwhelming majority of the Council of Ministers were in support of DFDS. And I just
No, sorry, they were not in support of DFDS. They were in support of abandoning the process.
Abandoning the process.
Yes.
Okay, but has there been potentially a split within the Council of Ministers over the firms who've come forward as part of this tender process, or has it been a case of there has been a consensus in terms of agreement for who to potentially go with earlier on?
My view is, and certainly when we did that, that was Friday the 1st of November. It was a really strong Council of Ministers that got it, understood why this. We took an informal vote. It has to be said to be informal. I think the result was 13-2 in favour of that route forward. Again, I come at it from. This is how anyone I spoke to about this around the Council of Ministers table. And indeed scrutiny, I came from the perspective of, this is how I'm seeing it. These are the concerns I have from a Jersey perspective. Guernsey doesn't seem to have those concerns, but these are our concerns. And I think I said it, am I insane for thinking of it like this? I think those were my exact words many occasions. I want to know, because I am not politically DFDS or Condor Brittany. I just want the best ferry services for Jersey, and I want them to be financially resilient. So everyone I approached and spoke to about it around the Council of Ministers table, it came from that perspective. Please tell me if I'm looking at this wrong.
But two didn't agree though. 2 out of the 15. Is that right?
As you wish.
I'm just asking.
Yes, yeah. 2 out of 15. I'd hardly call that a split.
Well, it is a split, but it's a 13-2 split. But who were the two? Were they significant?
Tell you off the top.
Were they significant?
It was an informal vote, so it wasn't recorded in that way. It was to get a sense of what Council.
Could I just return to my initial question?
Excuse me, sorry, just very quickly. I think Deputy Luce is right. The numbers that I put on that, there were a couple of people who voted a different way. But it may not have been 13. It may have been 15.
I'm not sure it
may
can
have
be
been something
13 too, because there aren't that many ministers.
But to
So
clarify,
don't hold me to the numbers, except 2 did vote
I
the
will
other
bring
way.
Deputy. We've all got questions, but the point is, it was effectively saying, look, we don't to end the process here. But the process had already ended, hadn't it? It had fallen apart.
Yes.
And the point is, the 13 out of the 15 didn't agree with awarding it to Condor, because if they had, it would have simply been agreeing with Guernsey and the whole process would be over and it would be done and dusted. So it is fair to say that 13 out of the 15 didn't want to go with Condor Brittany Ferries, isn't it, under what they knew?
No, because that wasn't the question. The question wasn't, do you want to go with Condor?
But it's implicit though, isn't it?
No, it's not.
It's implicit.
No, it's that thing, can we get around the table to have that meaningful conversation where the options are open? But that wasn't possible.
I'll bring in tips on.
Is it not, if I return to my first question, which was there something wrong with the process?
I've no doubt there was.
Did you actually have a flawed tender process operating from the very start?
I think, so I don't want to catch myself. I would say there's a lot to learn. Sorry, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, happy to. I think the process itself was really robust, and to maybe sort of put a bit of colour on the Minister's words, it's the Council of Ministers and the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development that says these are my aspirations for the ferry services of the future, is then for officers to put a process in place. I think the process brought forward some of the biggest ferry operators in Europe, and all of the bids were actually really strong. They included significant commitments to invest in the island's ferry services. I think it's
Both bids did that, did they?
yes,
All bids.
yes, and
Absolutely,
there was
including the others that didn't.
A company, and a company that was trailing a trail of debt was actually able to do that and say, oh yeah, well, we can modernise this and we can
And I think, sorry, the commitments to invest were absolutely provided. And then it's, well, which best meets the island's requirements, and do I have the confidence that what's on paper will actually come through in reality? And I think it was very much at the end of the process that the two islands maybe took a different course, where Guernsey were able to say, we have all the information we require to make a decision. Whereas I think from a Jersey perspective, we had, you know, it's great on paper, but will this be able to be provided through? As I think Deputy Morel, Minister, alluded to in his statement to the States Assembly. So I think the process is very good. Honestly, it's at the end of this that it's really unfortunate the two islands have taken different approaches when the finishing line's in sight.
Can I just ask on that, is that it seems to me that was always a potential possibility that the two islands don't agree. Was that something that you'd envisaged, Minister?
Yes, and I had conversations with my counterpart in Guernsey, and we'd said the important thing is to keep talking, because ultimately, it's always difficult to speak for a third party, but I do remember Richard Corrigan saying this to me, that he had said this to Guernsey. Ultimately, the decision is political. It is not a process-driven decision. If you took, and this was the issue that I had, if you went purely with what came out at the other end of the process, purely scores and numbers and, you know, assessments in that respect, you know, the way the actual process happened, I believe when I looked at those results and I looked at the bids in front of me, because I then had them, it wasn't a result that matched what was sat in front of me on black and white on paper. And that's what was so difficult to reconcile. And so this comes back to, Chair, your point about putting humans into the process. Genuinely, what I've been doing and what I've spent the last month trying to do, and it is Kafkaesque, is try to shepherd a process that was coming out with quite odd results at the end into what made sense. And partly, I have to say, partly that was because it wasn't possible to sit around the table with Guernsey and have a discussion about their findings and outcomes.
So can I come back to the point that when you talked earlier about the technical legal point and that there were some individuals involved in this who were neither government nor external, we're really talking about the law officers here, aren't we? You've been given law advice from the Law Officers Department saying, we think that DFDS's bid has failed on a legal point.
So it wasn't legal advice in that sense. It was a person doing an evaluating job of the bids that came in. And they spoke to their counterpart in Guernsey, and they came up with these two scores.
And
how were
those two appointed to the process in the first place?
Again, I'd have to look to the SRO report.
Yeah, so each of the areas from the previous process of 5 areas, and there were evaluators appointed who were subject matter experts in their areas to provide that advice.
So these lawyers, were they commercial lawyers? Is that what we're talking about? They were subject matter experts?
Well, it's subject matter experts in providing a view on contracts and law, yes. But
so
we
those who gave legal advice on this legal
point. It's really important, Chair. They were not giving legal advice. Yeah. It's really important to state that.
But the ones who assessed that they'd failed on a technical legal point, they were lawyers. Is that right?
Correct.
And were they commercial lawyers or were they generalists?
I'd say more generalist.
I was going to say, yes.
And they're generalists because they're law officers and they advise government routinely,
I think,
on legal issues. Had you ever considered getting external commercial lawyers to actually adjudicate on this point instead of the internal legal officers?
In hindsight, I think that would have been a preferable way forward.
And will you do that for the next tender process, the current tender process?
At the moment, we have, we have an
Yeah.
independent third party evaluating.
What, if it helps, what we've decided to do for this new second process, albeit a short process, is have an independent third-party evaluator sitting outside of government. I think it's really important for us to show both companies that we're doing something fresh and that we are effectively bringing in an external party to do those evaluations, effectively give those markings, and I will take information to recommend to the Minister.
That's useful. So following on from that, have the criteria for this new tender process remained the same? I mean, obviously the route's different, we know that, but have there been any other changes that you could let us know about in this new tender process that we should be aware of?
Some of the minimum service requirements have
We're
changed.
in the tender process as well.
Yeah, and it is very important. Thank you, Deputy Luce. It's important. We are in the tender process, so it is. We cannot say
We're aware,
things that might prejudice that process.
Sure.
I think obviously it being a Jersey-only service, so some of the requirements of service have changed. So we've been able to tell both companies about what they are, those minimum service requirements. At the end of the last process and going into this process, we've also made clear to both companies where we did have ongoing issues that we wanted to resolve. So both companies have been told where we have found ourselves from the past process. So we've been open with them as to where our issues have been, and so we've told both companies that. So we would expect to explore that again with them in this new shortened process. We still fundamentally want those issues answered for us. So I think we're just making sure we cover those points.
Yeah, I'm just.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realise Deputy Wilson was online.
No, she's all right. I think she's online. She's not necessarily in a position to ask a question, but I'm just making sure to bring her in.
Sorry, I just had no idea.
If it's necessary. Can I ask, and I will bring in my colleagues in a moment and thank them for their patience. But can I ask, I think you covered quite clearly in your statement that there are potential
I think pros and cons is the right way of putting it. There's shorter travel times if you're not passing, so there are swings and roundabouts. I think ultimately the proof will be in the pudding on what the bidders are prepared to commit to.
And in that regard, if we presume that there might, any company that tenders might think, look, there are potentially good times and bad times. There might be times where the market's good, where we're making a lot of profit. There might be times when we're not quite making as much as we thought we would. Would it be normal for a company to come to government and say, we would expect you, if we can't make a minimum amount of profit, to step in at that point and maybe help us in terms of investment of our fleet? Are those the kind of things that might easily get discussed?
So they could be discussed. I would say that we are absolutely, both the previous tender process and the current tender process, we are looking for a firm that will stand for 15 years without asking government for help.
Yeah.
That's absolutely what Jersey deserves. We deserve ferry services that we can rely on, come what may, in terms of the economic cycle.
Could I maybe? I think one of the points, it's a really good point, Chair, that it's important in any contract that there's a balance. And I think the financial sustainability, it's in Ireland's interest that the ferry operator is financially sustainable. So the process and the agreement we would look to seek, it's important that actually the ferry operator is making money on these services for them to be able to invest in the longer term. I think perhaps some of the points you were talking about there are force majeure scenarios that we could all think of pandemics, and where I'd say, okay, all bets are off. That's a different set of considerations that you need to deal with.
And does the carrying of significant amount of debt, does that therefore ring an alarm bell about how much money can be reinvested in a fleet versus how much money goes to servicing the pre-existing debt?
It's certainly a consideration.
Absolutely. It's got to be a consideration.
Okay.
And as is the way, the likelihood of that fleet investment has to be weighed up against elements like that.
And that's what you've done.
Yes.
So this new way of sorting out the tenders contains that element.
Well, yes, that will certainly be one
So
of the
we're
elements
not putting
looking
ourselves into a sportive role in the sense of we're not only finance part of the service.
That's correct. I have no intention of Jersey financing
question of
any element of the services.
And I think that, just going back to the fundamental point about why we're doing this, we want to have the assurance that the contract will run for its 15-year term. We want to make sure that the ferry company is financially sustainable. We want to see the investment in the fleet for the benefit of islanders. So ultimately, these are the issues, these are the big fundamental issues for this contract that we want to be really assured of before we make a decision on it. So at the moment in time, we haven't made a decision on, the only decision we have made is not to make a decision, if that makes sense. We are embarking on a new process to make sure that we get absolute clarity on those points before the Minister makes that decision.
I think it's really important, and this is what I was hoping people understood from my statement last week, was in many ways, the easy decision after Guernsey made their decision would have been for me to say, yeah, let's just go with Guernsey, let's just do that. The reason I didn't do that is because I still had significant concerns about the finances of the company that was potentially providing those services in that way. We wanted to ask more questions about that to find out more, to satisfy ourselves whether that was, a way forward. I think the really important decision that was made was to actually stand firm and say, no, we can't award to either bidder at the end of this process. That is not a position Jersey is in, and therefore we have to do something else. I mean, the pain that comes from that in terms of the scrutiny, and I don't mean that in a negative way, just, that it would have been a lot easier for me just to say, yes, we follow and we do it. But there were significant concerns that I could not overlook, and I still maintain that that's why I'm here as Minister, and it's inserting the human into the process.
Can I just ask, what risk it exists moving forward? We've got, say, two firms who initially were part of the first ferry tender process who didn't quite match the requirements that Jersey has set out. And if both of those firms are coming forward once again as part of a new process, I mean, how reassured can you be that finally a decision will be made?
I can be reassured. I am sure that we will make a decision one way or the other.
And can I just ask as well, obviously you're in your capacity as a minister, you are part of the political executive,
yes,
alongside 12 ministers as well. And when we're looking at this process, I mean, how difficult is it for you to potentially have a stance on maybe going with, say, one firm, but then the process in itself is maybe hindering your ability to take a decision?
I mean, in terms of the last process, that's a really interesting question, Deputy Andrews, because in terms of the last process, I felt that the only decision that was open to me was to ultimately end the process. And actually Guernsey kind of forced that issue by going ahead and naming someone outside of it. I think, it's 5 minutes left and I thought it was Deputy Wilson. That's just the way it is. There are just realities, I guess, in life. Because one firm had been eliminated, and again, I find it hard to understand exactly why, but they were. And the other company, from the Jersey perspective, did not pass muster. I'll just leave it at that. In that process, that can change in the new process. It wasn't possible for me to award it. It is a really weird and strange and unpleasant situation to be in, there is no question, because islanders want a decision. I know that, and I knew that. But I was not able, in that situation, to make a safe decision. And again, one of the reasons why the process binds you, which I think is perhaps what you're talking about, is the threat of legal action. So if one party to the tender process feels they have been treated unfairly, they have fairly strong recourse to, as the Attorney General said last week, they potentially have strong recourse to judicial review.
Yeah.
And that would be a worse place to get into, in my view, because then you could, if that was successful, you could have the whole thing rerun, the contract awarded to the other party, huge damages paid, whatever that may be. So as Minister, you are sat there looking at something you know that you want to give islanders a decision, because that's what islanders are seeking. But I was in the process where I was looking at the end of the process and saying, but I can't award either way. And one of the reasons for that, is the potential for legal action around that.
Yeah.
If you're seen to act unfairly to either party.
Can I just follow in on that? So we know we've got a new process coming up. The bids have not been submitted yet, have they? The bids have not been prepared or submitted.
We're expecting the bids back with us tomorrow.
Yeah. Are we going to be clear about who the bids are coming from and who the contract will be signed with? So, because what you've already said, Minister, is that you've got strong concerns about Condor running a service for Jersey because of the viability for the next 15
Under the
years?
last process.
Yes. But you've also said that you were concerned about who was signing it, and was it going to be Brittany Ferries or Condor Ferries? Yeah. So those are two different propositions, presumably, and you'd be more comfortable with Brittany Ferries rather than signing with Condor. That's what you've told us, I think.
I believe that would be the case.
To what extent do you think it could be argued? I mean, not looking at it externally, but there are people have told us outside who have submitted potential questions for this hearing, saying that it seems that you've already made up your mind in terms of who the preferred bidder is. You've told us that DFDS have put a stronger bid in for, as far as Jersey is concerned, for the previous one.
Process. It's really important. I am sitting in this room. One of Condor's lawyers is sat in this room with me at this moment, and so I have to be very, very careful in what I say in general. But I think it is right that the last process ended. Anything to do with that process is in that process, and that process has ended, and the decision wasn't made between the two. We are in a new process. I am completely open to either bidder winning that process. We have sent it an engaged external assessment of that process in order to deal with the issues that you are talking about, very much so. And I absolutely do not have a preference one way or the other. This is a new process. That process where, as I said in my statement, the FDS were more investment, etc. That was that process. I've no idea what they're going to bring forward in this one. No idea whatsoever. I've no idea what Brittany Ferries and Condor will bring forward in this one. No idea who I'll be signing a contract in one of those parties until they bring forward the bid.
But the manageability of any debt is going to be a consideration, presumably, for any bidder.
Absolutely. To be honest, it doesn't matter what the contract is. Outside of ferries, you think of it, if you're building a school and you're contracting with a party, if that party building that school has large amounts of debt, that is a consideration in your procurement process as to whether to award them the contract or not. Debt has to play a factor in that. It's financial viability might be a better word, or better phrase, but you have to look at that underlying strength in order to do that. This is a 15-year contract worth over £1 billion.
I know we're coming towards the end, and we started, I think, 5 minutes late, so maybe you'll allow us to have 5 minutes or so.
Less keen on yours, so.
I do have to ask about the contingencies. So I don't know if that's what you were going to ask, Deputy Son. I'm going to let you take over. So we know that, we understand you put contingencies in. What we mean by that is you put ferries on standby in the eventuality that there was a problem. We've understood that that's cost about £3 million to date. You've told the states you think that was a worthwhile and correct thing to do. Can I ask about how long you think that's going to have to continue for?
So at the moment we have contingency up to January 3rd.
Okay. What about the period between January and March?
So those are actually decisions that are upon me at the moment. And
what does it cost?
Ideally, I'd like to see through this process before having to make those decisions.
And is it at the cost of about £500,000 a month? Is that roughly what we're talking about? Yeah. Okay. Got any questions?
And within that context, can you sum up how much damage you think has been done by the process, the tendering process, and the abandonment of the old system?
I can't answer that question. I can't. How can I quantify damage done or not done by a process on a population? I don't know. That's not something I can answer. I'm really sorry.
Can I go back to a question about, there was a third bidder. I think we can name them because I've seen it in the public domain. It's Irish Ferries had put themselves into the process early on, and you told the Assembly they were eliminated quite early on. But of course, DFDS were also eliminated at the very end of the process. How do we know, how can we be assured that the other bidder was eliminated for a justifiable reason? And can you tell us the reason? We have to ask.
I can't tell you this precise reason.
We heard rumours that it might be that they didn't have the boats.
Off the top of my head, I can't. This is many months ago. Off the top of my head, I can't remember. Matt, do you
Sorry,
no.
It was.
Andy?
I don't know, but we can provide.
We can certainly provide you with that, but off the top of my head, I don't.
It just seems to be we've been put into this situation where it's very binary, and sometimes the psychology of a binary choice poses interesting conundrums for the public, I suppose. And whereas if can you be reassured that Irish ferries were eliminated for a reason that they would still be eliminated for now, if you know what I mean? Does that
Yes, I believe so, and Andy did. It was around the fleet, I believe.
Okay.
It was around their ability to muster a fleet, I believe.
Okay. And there was no letters of I don't know what you call them, no assurances sought that they could, did they provide any assurances that they could have a fleet up and running as and when they were awarded the contract?
I'd have to go into more deeply.
Yeah,
into that.
I don't know. I wasn't involved at that point, but I'll get that.
We can find all that information for you, but
The reason I ask is
I haven't double checked that far back.
the reason I ask is because I noticed the FDS, you said they had some boats, but not all of them, and that, but they had there was an assurance given that they would secure boats to run if and when they were awarded the contract.
Matt might be able to speak to that.
Sorry, in terms of would they have their own fleet as part of their proposal, as opposed to using Condor's fleet?
I
that
didn't
the
necessarily mean
question?
that. I think it was just it came out in the statement and answers that the FDS didn't necessarily have all the ships that they needed to run this, but they had assurances that they would be able to get them and commission them.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. They had their own independent fleet, was their proposal was based on. It wasn't based on using.
I think subsequently it'd be helpful to know whether it's us who do a scrutiny piece of work or someone else to look into all three bids.
Yeah, we can get an answer.
Absolutely.
But what I've seen of the process, it was a full and robust process. As you know, the right stages were done, the right questions were asked, the right valuations being done throughout the process. So we can get the Irish Ferries answer for you. There'll be a clear reason as to why they were taken out.
Okay. Now, I'll let, the question I wanted to ask is still around the interim provision. So we don't know who's going to be running the ferry service as of March. We do know that the current company has got the contract till the end of March. So Condor should be running it till the end of March, all things being well.
Yep.
In the eventuality that the current provider doesn't continue, and they maybe pull out earlier than March, because I don't think you've received assurances that they wouldn't pull out before then.
So
Is that correct?
That's the letter I referred to in my statement, or at least it was in my statement, as opposed to answers to my statement. I did write to the directors of Condor Ferries, Brittany Ferries, or Condor Ferries, I believe it was, in September, seeking assurance that if they were not to win the bid, that they would be able to continue until the end of March as their contract required.
What did they say?
The answer was, in short and paraphrasing, and I apologise for the detail that's being lost, the answer was they could not guarantee those services unless we came forward, unless we could confirm, or unless we could provide anywhere between 11 and 36 million, I think it was, pounds, to continue.
Some contingency. Some contingency.
Yes.
Without going around in circles, that surely is then the alarm bell which says, if you can't even cover your current obligation, then how can we award you this? And therefore, why were they not eliminated at that point from the...
Well, that question that I asked in September wasn't part of the process.
But it's part of the new system.
I think in fairness to the Minister, that's exactly some of the issues that the Minister's been grappling with. We've got to make a decision that we feel comfortable with as an island, that we know is going to go back to this fundamental points. We're going to have a sustainable ferry company for 15 years that is going to invest in fleet and provide service to the island. So, you know, the Minister's view is of course informed by experience and things that are relevant today. So these are exactly some of the issues that we were trying to resolve through, I guess, round one. We were unable to fully resolve, and now we've got to still get those same assurances in round two for sure.
I think this ties then into the contingency, because it seems to me the key contingency comes into play potentially once the preferred bidder has been announced, because that's the point at which we're most likely to need contingency. So whilst we've been paying £500,000 a month up until now, whilst there's been no announcement, it seems that the period we're talking about is between any announcement and the end of the current contract. So could you give us assurances that actually the key months between now and March that we need contingencies?
So, well, as I said, that's the decision I have yet to make. It's a decision that is upon me, but because I cannot just take the entire contingency solution for 1 month. You know, this is on a quarterly basis. So I'm right at, on one of the vessels I've taken it for 1 month, but in other vessels I have to do it on a quarterly basis. And so the question is, the question is quite simply, do I say yes to the contingency today, and then in 2 weeks' time, the contract may be awarded to Condor Brittany Ferries, and quite simply unlikely to need that contingency. And so, or do I speak to the contingency providers? Can they wait 2 weeks until we decide this and potentially save the islands from the island now, not shared?
But doesn't then that prejudice, if you don't take out contingency on the basis that you think you might award it to Condor, that's not what you've done up until now, is it? I think you've taken out contingency on the basis that, is that correct?
Can I maybe just say a few words? I think it's important to realise that over the last 12 months, there's been a number of times, a number of opportunities where we've had to renew the contingency, as the Minister's already said. And at every opportunity, Government of Jersey, the Minister in particular, has sought reassurances from Condor Ferries that they, financial reassurances, and at every opportunity that assurance has not been given, which has meant that at time after time throughout the last 12 months, the contingency has had to be renewed because of the risk that the government, that the Minister perceived was that there was a risk that Condor Ferries might stop operating in a very short period of time. We would have passengers in the UK, on the continent, and that.
But what I'm saying is that the contingency is most needed at the point at which
I'm very aware of that.
It's announced. So what I'm saying is that you knew it wasn't going to be announced until at least September, I think, and now it's been knocked back to November. So surely the logic is that contingency becomes, the insolvency of Condor becomes most critical at the point at which hypothetically they're not awarded the contract, and therefore debts are called in by the banks, and they potentially go out of business straight away. Is that a reasonable scenario? So given that that's always been the logic up until now, would you not simply apply that logic to the next?
I'm quite likely to apply that logic, but that decision has yet to be made, but it is upon me.
Yeah.
So I'll be making it in short order.
I guess what I'm saying, you spent £3 million on contingency up until now that you've not needed. Yeah. At the point when you might now need it, do you stop your insurance policy?
No. Okay. In general.
Have you got any other questions?
No, that's fine.
No. Minister, have you got any answers or any points that you'd like to convey to questions we haven't asked? No.
Other than to thank the panel.
Yeah. Can I thank you for coming in? I know this has been a difficult period for you and others. I hope you appreciate that there is a job of scrutiny to be done, and we appreciate you coming in today. Can we wish you all the best for a speedy resolution in either direction for this matter?
Thank you. I think if there's one thing, it is, and this isn't about me trying to in any way duck accountability. I come back to that point that at all times I have worked with other ministers to, as much as anything, to check my thinking. So this isn't about me just having one particular way of thinking. I am constantly checking it. Am I seeing this right? You know, I'm working with officers who provide recommendations, etc., etc. Yeah. This isn't me in a vacuum doing all of this. But at the end of the day, when it comes to a 15-year ferry contract, I think we've got to be really careful of how we award it and who we award it to. Yeah. And taking the extra few weeks that this has taken, the difficulty around the coverage, which I have to admit is difficult, it puts enormous pressures on all individuals involved, that is valid or worthwhile given the length of the contract and the importance of these services to this island. And so I think it is really important that we take these extra few weeks to make the right decision. And whichever way that decision goes, and it's really important, it can go either way.
Yeah, thank you. Before we end, thank you again. Can I thank those who have listened? Thanks for any members of the public who have written to us or submitted questions, and apologies if we've not been able to get through everything today, but we only had limited time. So again,